Hello and welcome back to SuperCoach Edge. Well. We spoke about it last week. We warned it was coming. Why? You needed to hold dearly onto whatever trades you have remaining for the inevitable late season injuries and suspensions. Well, it's happened. Carnage season has indeed arrived. From the weekend alone, we had Touk injuring his hemi and being ruled out for 4 to 6 weeks. Nic Martin, meanwhile, doing an ACL, and of course the Hornbag himself, all but ruled out for the season after undergoing surgery for a break in his foot. And of course, his captain in Rosie, hurting his hand as well and subbed out partway through the match. And then, of course, we had the big galoot in Xerri, who had to get himself suspended for 3 weeks. What do you think? Let's just maybe do a round arm. Surprised he didn't actually get a chair and smash it over Sparrow's head. That's virtually what he did, but ruled out for 3 weeks. Thank you for that, the red hot cherry pie, who is now the stone cold cherry pie. Might as well just throw you in the bin, mate. The other good news out of all that is Rosie is listed as a test for this coming weekend, but it is a reminder once again about the hazards of this time of year and why holding on to some spared injury trades can save your season. And as for the best replacements for the likes of Xerri, Martin, the Hornbag, and Tookie Miller, that'll be top of our agenda this week for our discussion in our trade segment, The Price is Right, so look out for that. But before we get stuck into things, of course, if you're not following us across our socials, you can do so via, of course, YouTube. Simply search SuperCoach Edge. Don't forget, of course, to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell as well to be notified of when our content does drop. On Twitter, you can find us at SuperCoach_Edge. You can find myself at DemoJ88. And Liam, you can find at Liam Evans_95. Of course, he's going to clip me for that because I always stuff this up. Facebook, Insta, TikTok. Just search SuperCoach Edge and you will find us across those channels as well. Now, speaking of Liam, he has timed his trip to Japan perfectly and all but clocked off for season 2025, being an owner of, unfortunately, Martin, the Hornbag, and Xerri collectively with virtually no trades left. So I must say it's a good way to escape the carnage. And, if you're away from it, it's out of sight, out of mind. Hey, it hasn't happened. So, Liam, enjoy the rest of your trip abroad in Japan. Now, let's kick things off with a brief look, as always, at how Liam and I both fared in round 18, and then update who was victorious in our in-season head-to-head. So, for round 18, I ended up scoring a 2,294 and ended up sliding, unfortunately, 1,503 spots to now sit just ranked inside the top 10K at 9,984th overall. Again, unfortunately, much like last week, it was another week where injury ruined my week, with Rosie's injury affected 53 a major factor. Likewise as well, the frustration did continue with Primos just sub-tunning. We had Dacos, Holmes, Basilinka, Warner, Track, Sarong, Chera, and of course, Sam Darcy. But I'm not really too phased at this point. I mean, normally I probably would be. I've got a full Primo team, bar the flex, but we're kind of keeping trades up our sleeve, and for good reason, as we just spoke about with those injuries, because the strategy here has switched firmly to survival mode. I've just flicked that switch, and now it is a case of just holding on to trades and sitting back nicely with bench depth in what should be a survival of the fittest, with many, many coaches copying issues to deal with, but having either limited or no trades. So now is the time to hold on those trades and just really hope for just a bit of mercy from the Supercoach gods and other coaches out there. As I said, limited trades, potentially out of trades altogether after this weekend. It really is. It comes down to depth. It comes down to a bit of luck, of course, but they may have to gobble a donut here or there and potentially be without that 23rd flex player to give them that sort of security blanket. So I should be able to climb the ranks as others are forced to gobble up donuts on the run home. So we're sitting back here. We're not really doing too much. I mean, the most that we can do within our power is, of course, selecting the best, captain score from week to week. So that's where the strategy comes into things as well. Not so much, having to upgrade my team. I mean, ideally, it would be good to bring in a 23rd Primo, as I had sort of, planned to do. But as you would have seen in my team talk, and if you haven't, go and check it out because I'll discuss all this and more in my Team Talk episode, which is live now on either YouTube or via audio podcast. So go and check that out if you haven't already. As for Liam, though, he ended up scoring a 2,247. Ranking-wise, he's now ranked 37K. So as I said, he's kind of clocked off for the season. A lot of content creators out there have, off the back of what has been a difficult season, but more than that, there are other things going on in life as well. So, weighing up things in terms of enjoyment factor, injuries, suspensions in AFL, and of course, all the issues that you have to, if you are a fellow Don supporter or a Carlton supporter, it's a bit hard to sort of get up and about from week to week. But of course, as I mentioned, the poor bloke in Liam, he has copped the full brunt on the weekend. He had Nic Martin go down, Hornbag and Xerri as well. So I don't think he has actually any trades up his sleeve. So we'll have to rely on his bench cover and also rely on his, flex player covering for a potential donut. So in terms of our head-to-head, I ended up extending my lead 11-5 with our points differential sitting at 1,090 points. But hey, as I always say, with this late season carnage, anything can happen. Anything can happen. So it's not out of the realms of possibility as yet. I mean, we have 6 rounds to go. So he would need to win every single one of these rounds coming to level the scores with me. So we'll see what happens here. Could happen, may not. But let us now turn our attention to the fun part of the episode. As always, it is where we unveil our wrap-up of the week in parody song form, and it's called The Round Remix.
Captain Loophole, double score dream, best 18 heroes, that's the ultimate scheme. Super coach hustle, points on the board, every player stats like a secret hoard. But now is the time to get your fix, it's the Super Coach Edge Round Remix. Round Remix.
So in the Round Remix, each week we hit play on a parody song that we've whacked together, compiled, brainstormed, and punched out something a little bit catchy, a little bit funny, and of course, best summarizes the round that was. Now, this round's remix track, as you might have guessed it, is all about Carnage season that has so wonderfully graced us with its presence. So let's hit play on what's titled the Round 18 Carnage Blues.
Horne-Francis tried to take a stand. Now he's sidelined with a busted foot. Man, Martin went down. Oh, the crowd just froze. ACL, that's how the story goes. Rosie's hands all taped and sore. Xerri's gone for 3 weeks or more. It's carnage, it's chaos, my team's in a bind. Super coach dreams left way behind. I pick 'em, they break, they fall, they bruise. Welcome to the round 18 Carnage Blues. My trades are gone, I've got none to spare. I'm gluing this team with hope and prayer. Xerri's suspension, it's just my luck. Feels like my season's hit a garbage truck. Rosie can't catch, Martin can't run. My super coach squad is officially done. It's carnage, it's chaos, my team's in a bind. Super coach dreams left way behind. I pick 'em, they break, they fall, they bruise. Welcome to the round 18 Carnage Blues.
And as always, if you have any ideas that come to mind, any creative ideas, any narratives you think would be a nice sort of topic for the parody song, the Round Remix, let us know. Hit us up on socials, in our Discord, all that sort of stuff, and we will happily piece it together. Now, with round 19 on the horizon, wow, I can't believe it's round 19 already. Let's jump into trade talk with The Price is Right.
The price is right.
The price is wrong, bitch.
For those tuning in for the first time, The Price is Right is the segment where we discuss potential trades and trade targets from week to week, or whether a specific player under question should even be traded at all. Now, attention at this time of the year is not so much on upgrade season as we spoke about. That has come and gone, and it's now firmly on patching holes, using the duct tape, patching those holes, which our teams are kind of looking a little bit like Swiss cheese at the moment. And we are looking for best replacements for those out injured long-term and suspended as well. So from here on out, I think for the remainder of the season, just to make things a little bit easier and be a little bit more topical, The Price is Right will be used as that sort of vehicle to chat about the main topic of choice, the main players that are ruled out for the season, because let's face it, we've only got 6 rounds remaining. And if we use Xerri as an example, he's out for 3 weeks, and that's 3 of the remaining 6 weeks. So that's virtually half of the season that is to come. So we have to sort of keep in mind as to what is worthy of a trade, because we don't have many trades up our sleeve, if any, as yet at the moment. So of course, the big topic of discussion this week is the fact that both Nic Martin and Horne-Francis have been ruled out for the season, whilst Touk is out for 4 to 6 weeks. So I think he probably will return at the earliest for the SuperCoach Grand Final if you do make it in your head-to-head leagues. And of course, Xerri will, as I just mentioned there, will miss half the remaining games to come in the 2025 home and away season. So all of which are worthy of a trade. So before we tuck into the broader ruck discussion, replacements there, because there are quite a few to touch on, let's first outline some of the best replacements for Nic Martin, who is priced at 469.4k as a defender forward. Of course, Touk, who is priced at 544.3k as a mid, and Horne-Francis, who is priced at 438.6k as a forward mid. So we're going to chat about, I think, 10 prospects here. We've narrowed it down to a whole host of fallen primos, value options, rookies even, and of course the higher ups that we think you should be looking at as well. So let's start off with Lachie Whitfield, defender, of course, 489.6k with a break even of 173. So Whitfield, he bounced back from his concussion game with a score of 105, which probably should have been higher, but had points deducted from his 33 disposal game due to a rare low disposal efficiency game. He is ranked 8th for defenders in terms of average, but of course that contains his concussion score of 16. So his true average, once we deduct that, is 112.9, which ranks him number 1 ahead of, believe it or not, Wanganeen-Millera and Lachie Ash. And to highlight the bargain that he is currently priced as the 16th most expensive defender, which is pure insanity in that context there. Highest averaging defender, yet 16th most expensive. Doesn't quite match up, does it? So again, pure value. Of course, with his high break-even of 173, due of course to his concussion game still in his rolling average, there is potential that he could drop further in price. But if you're an owner of, say, a Martin or a Horne-Francis, and you can, use DPP swings to put, the replacement for Horne-Francis in defense, and then maybe swing someone else from a different line into Horne-Francis' spot, you don't really have a luxury of waiting, unfortunately, if you are an owner of either of those guys. And the same applies as well to Touk. Either way, it isn't out of the realm of possibility, having mentioned all that he reaches his break-even, given, of course, that he faces an injury-depleted Essendon in round 19. So anything can happen. He's actually a captaincy choice, a bit of a sneak preview here for I'm the captain now, because of the fact that the Giants could do a number on the Dons, and Whitfield could have a day out, but we will chat about that a little bit later. But do like Whitfield. If you don't own him, he is probably one of the biggest bargains of the season to date. Moving on now to another bit of an interesting prospect here. Not one that's been spoken about in recent weeks, but definitely put his name up in lights. It is Josh Daicos, defender mid, priced at 542.3k with a break-even of 31. Now, we don't want to be seduced by the recency bias of a player coming off a massive score, as Daicos did himself with a massive 198, but it is his change in role that appeals most here and why he is the topic of discussion. After scoring a 72 in the first 3 quarters on the weekend against the Suns in his usual role of halfback, he was injected into the midfield in the last quarter and, get this, scored a 126 in a single quarter in the last quarter. And in a football sense as well, he almost single-handedly won the game for Collingwood. Like, I haven't seen anything like this since the days of Ablett Jr. It was really dominant on the level, kick goals, set up goals, courageous acts. It really left me salivating and wanting him in my team, but unfortunately I can't afford the trades. But the big question here for Josh Daicos is whether the role persists. But given the effectiveness, of course, of Josh Daicos through the engine room with his much-needed speed and dash, with, of course, it's spoken about a fair bit with Collingwood, with the slowness of Long and Mitchell in their engine room being an issue, you would think that this at least continues into another week. I've seen numerous times in the media coming out of the weekend that they've been hailing the injection of Josh Dacos into the engine room as a massive, massive win from the Pies. So I'd be very much surprised if it doesn't, again, persist for another week at the very least. And I think there is room for him to move through the middle. Whether or not it's a permanent thing, we'll have to wait and see. But he could be more of a swing between midfield and halfback. But we'll wait and see there. Also, speaking of Dacos, has that crucial defender mid DPP for coverage, which is also handy, as we know, this time of year with injuries and suspensions virtually just coming out of the woodwork. But another play here that we will just throw up, just to mix things up. Cooper Harvey, as a forward, 119.9k with a break-even of -86. Now, he is a left field option, and only if you're in the market for a cheaper, rookie-priced option to free up cash with a secondary trade. I wouldn't be bringing him in as, a like-for-like or anything like that. Cooper Harvey is, if you are in the market for this sort of player, one such player. Scored 74 and 84 in his first 2 games playing as a high half forward, but his most recent score came largely off the back of kicking 4 goals too, just for a little bit of context there. As such, I wouldn't be confident in using him as a F6 and would only consider him as a downgrade option on the bench for cover if you're in the boat of not having to deal with, injury, carnage, and maybe using him, as I mentioned, as a downgrade in order to cash out on a maxed out cash cow to fund an upgrade with a second trade. So as an example here, perhaps not having enough money in your bank to trade either Martin or Horne-Francis directly to a primo at a higher price point with one trade. So that would require, of course, an additional trade to free up money. And that, secondary trade may be trading a maxed out rookie. It may be a Zach Johnson from Essendon, for example, using DPP swings, Angus Clark, those sort of guys down to Cooper Harvey to give you that extra cash to then boost the likes of Martin or Horne-Francis, respectively. But let's move on now to more straight-up propositions. And it is Andy Brayshaw, midfielder, priced at 546.6k with a break-even of 104. Now, Brayshaw's price has been in free fall since round 10, dropping from 659k, but he has still scored in that time 123, 130, 103, 103, 121 in those 8 games, with the other sub-tons a reasonable 84, 96, and 99. So I think to get him at his current price point is pure insanity, considering that he is the 3rd best averaging mid behind the likes of Bont and Butters. Yet, he is priced at the 19th most expensive mid. Also, a bit of a bonus here, will avoid tags most weeks, with Sarong being the one most opposition sides choose to tag instead. So, in terms of, what I value with, price point, value, and, the scoring ceiling, the scoring floor, both being quite high, I think Andy Brayshaw ticks all the boxes for someone around about that price point of, 550k. Anyone else around this price point we'll chat about in a moment in terms of value, but I think he's going to be a top 8 mid. And of course, he is the 3rd best averaging mid at the moment. So he's only got 6 games to maintain that mantle. And at that price point, you can't go wrong. Let's move on to another value proposition in Tom Liberatore, midfielder priced at 553.4k with a break-even of 35. Now, we highlighted Libba as an option last week due largely to getting back in CBAs off the back of Treloar getting injured, and he would have rewarded new owners with that 126 score that he had on the weekend. As we said last week, with Treloar ruled out for virtually the entirety of the home and away season, we can guarantee Libba will maintain his spot at the coalface, busting out scores that saw him average a 119.2 in his first 11 games of the season. Currently, he's the 3rd best scoring mid for the season, 6 on average, yet is still priced as the 17th most expensive mid currently, and was the 22nd most expensive last week. So, of course, more value last week if you jumped on him, but still extreme value. So when we're talking value, he ranks just behind Brayshaw. So in terms of what we would rank them, it would be Brayshaw, Libba, when we're talking about, the propositions, the prospects in the mid category. Now to move on to Isaac Rankin, who is a mid forward, of course, 492.9k with a break-even of 60. We also mentioned Rankin last week alongside Libba in terms of being the most or among the best value on the market, and he has since increased 23.3k in price off the back of a 105 score. Is ranked number 1 for the best scoring forward for the season and 4th currently on average, with 3 of his remaining 6 games rated favourable matchups against the Suns, North and Eagles. So really do love his run home. And of course, also, as we mentioned, has that DPP coverage to give you cover across multiple lines on the run home. So do like him if you haven't got him in your side as yet. Another player that was a popular start in a lot of our teams for 2025 is Jack Macrae, mid-forward, 520.6k with a break-even of 89. And when targeting players from this point onwards, we need to factor in whether said player is going to finish as a top averaging player in their respective line. Now, Macrae might be top 8 midfielder, but in the forwards, he certainly will. Currently ranked 3rd behind only Pazlenka and Jackson. Since returning from his punctured lung, he has recaptured his early season form as well, with scores of 87, 131, 91, 116, and 108 on the weekend. Even better is that he has a favourable run home with games against the likes of Melbourne, North, Richmond, and an injury-decimated Essendon to come in 4 of his remaining 6 games. So he's currently in my team. If I didn't own him, if I traded him out, I'd be looking to get him back in. Again, we want to target these players that are going to be top averaging of their line from here on out. And I think Jack Macrae certainly will, because the run home, that plays a big factor, as well as obviously form. Now, moving on to a couple of big dogs here, and they probably speak for themselves. It is Marcus Bontempelli, midfielder, 592.8k with a break-even of 49. And it should go without mentioning Labont as an option, but it does astound me he is still only owned by 39.4% of the competition. This is the last chance to get on him with such a low break even, and coming off scores of 133 and 174, he's hitting form and at the right time. The Dogs need to win matches and continue winning in order to make finals, and he is the barometer. He's the sort of player that can stand up in games and help secure wins for the Dogs and deliver us, in SuperCoach terms, big points. So legit, if you don't own him for whatever crazy reason, prioritize him, as he is a must-have to complete your midfield of primos. And the other one here is Zach Butters, midfielder, 611k with a break-even of 100. And the Buttery one is, again, another one that we shouldn't have to mention given his quality, but even more astounding is his lower ownership than Bont at just 28.5% of the competition. And he's been an absolute picture of consistency all season, with just 1 score below 100 across 14 games for an average of 122.2, ranking him as the 2nd best averaging midfielder at the moment. Comes off the back of a 154 as well against the Eagles, and whilst he is still 37.9k below his starting price, believe it or not, he will only increase in price from here. So when we're thinking about the cream of the crop, these guys are still both reasonably priced, and if you don't own them, get them in your team. We know the ceiling scores they can deliver, the high floor scores, and they give you security from week to week. They give you another, captaincy option as well. So just factor all that in, get them in your team. Now let's move across to the defense, and it is Jack Sinclair, defender mid, and he is priced at I couldn't believe it, 483.1k. and a break-even of currently 112. Now, Sinks has been off the boil in recent weeks with scores of 65, 89, and 72 before returning to form with a 106 on the weekend against the Swans. Prior to those 3 down games, he had been scoring like crazy with a 124, 131, 143, 113, and a 109 in a stretch of games. With Wanganeen-Millera also attracting a little bit of a tag on the weekend, it should sort of give you a little bit of an insight for the run home of teams that may potentially put a little bit of time and effort into sort of nullifying Wanganeen-Millera, and thus allow Sings to get off the chain and just inflict a bit more damage in SuperCoach terms. The great thing about Sings is when he tons, he goes large, hitting the heights of 124, 131, 143, 145, and a 162. He was priced as high as 600.5k back in round 14, and now is at a massive discount despite being the 4th best scorer of all defenders and ranked 5th in terms of average. On the run home, he faces Melbourne, North, Richmond, and Essendon in 4 of his remaining 6 games, so he's in line to finish as a top 6 defender. So when we talk about, again, cream of the crop, guys that are going to finish top of their line, he's definitely one of those. So look at him very closely. Rounding things out with a couple more options here, we have Colby McKercher, defender mid, priced at 494.5k and a break-even of 64. Has turned around his season since being given the plum role as distributor off halfback with scores of 144, 60, 96, 108, 123 and 110 in that time. Now, a bit of a plus here as well. He has the third best 3-round average of all defenders with a 113.7 and is a definite option if you don't have as much cash to splash and can't afford anyone over 500k. So 494.5k, definite tick. Likewise, Sinclair, 483.1k as well. Now, let's round things out with a bit of a left field option here, much like when we were chatting about Cooper Harvey. It is Sam Flanders. Defender mid, 387.4k with a break-even of 87. Now, a bit of a Hail Mary risky option here. Has been playing a bit of a higher role than his traditional half-forward role that he had earlier in the season, moving up the ground and playing more in the centre for scores of 91, 87, 76 and 70 in recent weeks. So not big scores to blow us away, really attract our attention. However, his scoring ceiling could potentially ramp up with a possible return to the engine room to replace Tookie Miller. This is a role that saw him average 119 in 2024, as we remember, and made him a must-have primo. The question, though, is whether he actually gets that role back or is he overlooked once again? Humphrey had a sizable increase in CBAs on the weekend to the tune of 82%, up from 28% on the previous week due to that injury to Touk. But is there enough room to rotate Flanders in there as well? If so, we might see an increase in his scoring, as I mentioned, but it is a massive, massive risk. I'd really only go for this option if you only had limited funds to go for. But even so, I'd be aiming a little bit higher. You could probably lump, Bailey Humphrey in this discussion as well. As I mentioned him, he had a fair chunk of CBAs, but I don't trust his scoring. Whereas I think with Flanders, he has that scoring history about him, and all he needs is the role. So you probably can't afford to wait a season. So it would just be an out and out risk option. But just thought I'd mention him because he could pop off and he could be one of the bargain buys for the season, much like Bailey Humphrey. But again, both of these guys I probably wouldn't trust, and I much prefer looking elsewhere. Now, let's move on to the all-important ruck discussion here with Tristan Xerri. As we mentioned, he's only out for 3 weeks. Now, if you are someone that has to deal with the issues of Xerri, Touk Miller, Nic Martin, Horne-Francis, if you have all four, I do feel awfully sorry for you, with limited trades as well. If you have like 3 of those players to deal with, it's just as much of an issue. But if you have 2 players to deal with and Xerri's one of those, you could probably get away with trading a Xerri and one of the other guys that you own who's going to be out for an extended period. But if you own 3 of the 4 or 4 of the 4, you may have to keep Tristan Xerri, even if you're going to gobble a donut, as long as you have someone in your flex that can provide cover there. So just keep that in mind. But I think by and large, if you are having the luxury to only be dealing with, someone else as well as Xerri or just Xerri, I'd be looking to move Xerri on because he's going to be missing half the remaining games for the season. So for me, in my eyes, that's a definite out. Now, we will discuss, of course, here the best ruck prospects to consider as replacements for the now stone cold cherry pie. First up, we do have, and I'm going to call this segment Ruck Me Up. And first up, we have the man who is the most in form in the competition at the moment. It's Brodie Grundy. 737.8k with a break-even of 161. Now, Grundy is priced almost as high as what Gawn was when he hit his peak of 744.8k in round 10, but it is for good reason, with a 5-round average of 154.8 and a 9-game average of 144.4, highlighting his recent dominance. And to give you a bit of a taste of the dominance that he's had, it has featured scores of 121, 135, 161, 155, 159, we haven't finished, 179, 127, and a 154 in 8 of those 9 games. Just insanity. But one look at his remaining 6 games, and it's obvious to see that dominance could well continue until the end of the season, with 5 of his last 6 encounters against favourable opponents. Now, we have North Melbourne, who, of course, they'll be without Xerri as a suitable second ruck. They'll probably have Callum Coleman-Jones as that ring-in replacement, and he's going to get a baptism of fire from Brodie Grundy. Then after that, he has the Giants, who concede the 3rd most points to rucks over the course of the season. Essendon, who concede the 3rd most points to rucks in their past 5 games. And, again, if Goldstein gets a rest as well, Vicentini will probably come in, and that's even a more concerning prospect for Vicentini and a better prospect if you are an owner of Grundy. Also, faces Geelong, who concede the 6th most points to rucks. And, of course, rounding things out with West Coast, who concede the most points to rucks. I normally wouldn't advocate forking out an extra 160k odd to go from Xerri to Grundy, but if you can afford it with spare money in the bank, I think it could be worth it, provided you aren't burning your last remaining trades in order to fund it. So don't mind it. I wouldn't say it's an out-and-out move to make, but if you can afford to do it, if you have a couple of extra trades up your sleeve, if you're an absolute freak and you've got, 4, 5, 6 trades up your sleeve, I wouldn't mind doing it. I wouldn't mind doing it because of those matchups and his incredible form. He could pop off and just remain at this price point for the remainder of the season. Something to consider, no doubt. Let's move on now to an equally tantalising prospect. Probably not in terms of the amount of output of points that he's going to accrue for the remainder of the season. Who knows, he might. But it is the big miso Gorney, Max Gawn. Priced at 574.9k with a break-even of 154. And he's currently the most traded in option among the rucks, and it's no surprise given that Gawn is only 1.4k difference in price point to Xerri. Gawn is still the number one averaging ruck with 123.6 ahead of Xerri on 121.5 and Grundy on 121.4. Now, don't be fooled by Gawn's recent dip in scores as well against the Suns and Adelaide, when he scored a 90 and 79, because the Crows are the third most restrictive side to opposition rucks over the past 5 games, and Gold Coast are the 4th most restrictive across the entirety of 2025. Outside of those 2 games, he has turned up from rounds 3 to 14 for a 139.7 average across that stretch, so we can't deny his quality. And his current price point doesn't quite do him justice to that quality, having dropped 170k in price despite scores of 153, 110, 131, 126, that 90, 79, and then a 112 on the weekend. The big appeal to Gawn is his favourable run home, with some really nice green matchups against St Kilda, who give up the 2nd most points, West Coast, who give up the most points, Western Bulldogs, who he has scored 162, 130 and 140 against in his past 3, and Hawthorn, who he scored a 142 and 113 against in his past 2 as well. So some really nice running games there on the run home, and hence the reason why I do like him as an out-and-out, direct replacement virtually in terms of price point. Now, another option is Darcy Cameron, priced at 571.3k with a break-even of 146. DCam has been among the more consistent rucks in the back half of the season, with tons in 9 of his last 11 games. And whilst his ceiling isn't massive, with only 4 scores above 120 plus, of the 12 tons that he has posted, he has scored 110 plus in 10 of those 12. So I really like him. The great thing about DCam also is he has a very, very high floor, with only 5 sub-tons. Of his remaining games, they feature Freo, Richmond and Hawthorn as favourable matchups, but has 3 difficult ones to counteract that as well against Brisbane, Adelaide and Melbourne. Either way, don't mind DCam as an option. We also have Rowan Marshall, good old Romo, priced at 598.1k with a break-even of 124. It's been a bit of a topsy-turvy season for Romo, with his past 6 scores reading 55, 89, 80, and then a 124, 159, 135, and a 100. So it really sums up the Jekyll and Hyde nature of his season. On the weekend, bit of a danger here and an insight into what could continue for the remainder of the season. He spent a season-high 23% game time up forward, with a second equal low 64% time in the ruck due to Max Heath coming into the team, which may put a little bit of a slight dent in his scoring ceiling if this does continue, which Ross Lyon came out and mentioned it and said that it would continue in terms of sort of experiment things and trying to work out the best mix. And that does give me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies as a non-owner. His run home matchup-wise isn't too bad, with favourable games against North, Richmond, Essendon and the Giants in 4 of his remaining 6 games. We also have Lukey Jackson, 602.9k with a break-even of 198. And again, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of matchup difficulty for the run home for Jacko, with 3 easy games against West Coast, Port and the Dogs, and 3 hard games against Collingwood, Carlton and Lions. Mind you, the overarching issue here with Jackson is the fact that he is sharing the ruck with Shrek Darcy back to sort of that 30 to 45% load in the ruck. That does mean that the insane scoring disappears unless he is that outright number one ruck. We all know what he can do, the height he can hit, the 180 odd as the number one ruck, but with Shrek Darcy there, a little bit different. However, having said all that, Jackson's recent shift into the engine room as a tall midfielder is something that I guess helps elevate the once low scoring floor that he's had when he has been sharing the ruck, because he has been able to score 122, 100, 116, 80, and 84 in that time since Darcy's return, where he hasn't been playing as the pure ruck. So when he's been sharing the load in the ruck, he's been able to go into the midfield still as sort of that bit part midfielder as well, swinging between the forward and midfield, and still able to bust out reasonable scores. And let's not overlook the fact that Darcy is being managed for time on ground since returning to the side, and the fact that he could be rested for interstate games to preserve him, as he was against Essendon a few rounds ago. Otherwise, we could also see, of course, the possibility of him sustaining another soft tissue injury. It's not without, the realms of possibility of it happening. It has happened so often, unfortunately, for Shrek Darcy himself, but it's something to keep in mind. And it does provide a little bit of an extra caveat here, but I think more often than not, what we will see is Darcy maybe being rested and maybe even given a little bit less time on the ruck. Darcy has performed a bit of a roll up forward as well for Freo in recent games, kicking, I think, the almost the sealer for Freo on the weekend. And off the back of that, it might see him spend a little bit more time forward compared to Jacko. So we'll wait and see with regards to that combination there. But I don't mind, having said all that, with Jackson being an option, with a little bit of a caveat there of him elevating that low scoring floor. Now let's move on to Tim English, the last two options here. He is one of those. 578.8k with a break-even of 141. English, he has largely struggled to piece together any consistency in his season for 2025, especially in the early part, with sub-tons in 5 out of his opening 11 games. But he was able to turn things around by scoring a 127, 115, 142, 109, and a 109 again from rounds 13 to 17. That largely came off favourable matchups against Hawthorn, St Kilda, and Richmond, but the good thing is that the fixture continues to shine favourably on English for the run home. In 4 out of his last 6 games, they look like favourable matchups against Essendon, the Giants, West Coast, and Freo, with the 2 tough games being against the Lions and Melbourne. So again, probably you might not consider English, considering hasn't been the most reliable, but it seems as though he's sort of chugging along and he is more reliant upon having good matchups, which they're coming in spades. So really don't mind him as an option as well. And then to round things out, probably a less favourable option for me in my eyes anyway, it is Lloyd Meek, priced at 540.6k with a break-even of 34. And Meek has really had a poor season by his standards, sub-tunning in 8 of his 17 games across the season, with some putrid scores in there, featured scores of 43, 56, and 78. The upside, however, is when he has cracked the ton, he has scored nicely with 126, 161, 134, 140, and 151. However, it does really highlight the massive deviation that he does have in his scoring range, and it's something that you're probably, especially if you're going for cash leagues and all-important head-to-head leagues, that you don't really want these sort of players in your team because they can really hurt you on any given week if they do have that downturn in scoring. Has among the hardest run home as well for his fixture, with tough games in 5 out of his 6 against Carlton, Adelaide, Collingwood, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Taking all of that into consideration, I, myself personally, wouldn't be overly keen on Meekie, despite the fact that he is, I think, the cheapest option of those that we've been chatting about. Now, there are a whole host of other players as well that we could mention here, but again, we won't. Either they have issues with regards to their change in role, much like TDK, or they're having to share ruck again, much like TDK, with other players coming in and really putting a dampener on their scoring output. It's time, though, now to chat about the all-important VC and C options, because here on out, for the run home, that's virtually where we're going to differentiate our teams with the rest of the competition. So let us jump into all things captains and VCs with I'm the Captain Now.
Look at me. I'm the captain now.
Now, as always, we've scrounged through the data and found the best options for you to consider and narrowed it down to our top 5 options. First up, we have someone we spoke about from the top who should come out and absolutely pummel one of the biggest scores we might see in recent times. Brodie Grundy, Now, Grundy is on an absolute tear in recent weeks with a 9-game average of 144, highlighting his recent dominance. He now faces North Melbourne at the perfect time with Xerri being suspended, so will face a relative rookie replacement in Callum Coleman-Jones, who will be given a baptism of fire, you would expect. Totally expecting a 150 score minimum on recent form line alone, but could push close to a double ton. Seriously, it could be one of the biggest scores in recent times. So if you own him, if you're bringing him in, I would VC him straight up, even just see him straight up. But I think he should be the biggest scorer for the round. So if you could, put the VC on him. And if he somehow has a down game, if he gets injured, knock on wood, it doesn't happen. But it just gives you that security. But he is a definite pod as well, which will give you a leg up on the rest of the competition and, of course, your head-to-head leagues. Now, another option is, of course, Lachie Whitfield. Spoke about him earlier as an option, as a bit of a trade-in for one of your injured players. He scored 100, 112 and 89 in his past 3 against Essendon, but he faces a decimated prospect this time around, which is absolutely ravaged by injury. And this is a side that is giving up by far and away the most points to opposition attacking defenders. So it really could be an incredible matchup for Whitfield to exploit. That is, if the Dons are able to get their ball into the forward half, given what we saw against Richmond last round, which was an absolute calamity. So hopefully that does happen. Otherwise, Whitfield may be starved at the ball. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But nonetheless, plays first up for the round. Could be an interesting one for VC. Bit of a left field option as well. Don't mind him. And also we have Maxi Gawn. So whilst Carlton are rated as the tougher opponent with Pitnet largely the number 1 ruck, Gawn has actually been able to score well against the Blues across the journey, with scores of 111, 103, 84, 129, 117 and a 184 dating back to 2020. Now, he isn't a guaranteed, surefire, safe C/VC option, but in a week where there isn't a clear-cut option, he does provide relative safety. We also have Zach Butters. A couple more primos to round things out, but Zach Butters, he faces the Hawks this weekend and looks a relatively safe C or VC choice given he has turned up in 13 of his 14 games across the season. Scores of 135, 127 and 105 in his 3 most recent encounters against the Hawks, but all of those games were at Adelaide Oval and instead faces the Hawks in Tassie. The other query as well that I have is if Rosie doesn't play, it leaves Butters with a massive spotlight on himself as that primary candidate for the tag. But do the Hawks actually run with one? They have McGuinness. Do they do it? They haven't really been tagging en masse across the season. So it's not a given thing. It's not a sure thing. And given that, I don't mind Butters still as an option for the C/VC. Now, to round things out, we have Marcus Lebontempelli. And in a week where, again, we aren't really blessed with standout options, what better than to lean back on the cream of the crop in LeBont. Now, Bont, he faces a tougher proposition in the Lions on the weekend, who he has only scored 99, 89 and 108 against in his last 3. But like Adelaide last round, who he'd only scored 119, 112 and 88 against, he could still come out and score similar to what he did against the Crows on the weekend with that 174. Because who could have picked that? It's Bont after all. It's at this time of year that we kind of have to lean upon these bigger name players. And as we know, the Dogs, they need to win and continue winning to secure a finals berth. So what better than the captain himself, LeBont, to stand up, deliver the win, have a massive influence on games, and punch out a really nice SuperCoach score. So again, we'll just whack him in there, cream of the crop as an option there. Probably more of a safe sort of seat you want to plant your ass on and just watch Bont do his thing. So keep him in mind as well. Now, onto our captaincy head-to-head tips. Last week, Liam had the first choice, and he went for Put It In H Merritt, whose 96 bested the 85 from my choice in Little Nicky D, and was a very, very close encounter, 11 points separating both of us. But hey, it secured a win for Liam, and our head-to-heads now sit at 8 wins my way to Liam's 7, with the points differential 53 in my favour. So this is going to come down to the wire, I think, for the remainder of the season, more so than our head-to-head sort of win-loss ratio. But again, we need to be on the ball when it comes to captaincy options because, as we said, that's what could be separating you from having a win compared to a loss in your head-to-head leagues, and of course climbing the ranks as opposed to sliding down them. Now for our choices this coming round, I have the first choice this time around in what looks to be a tough week for captains with no clear-cut choice. Well, apart from the fact if you are an owner of Brody Grundy facing the cherryless North. So he will be my pick first up. And Liam, I'm awaiting his choice of what he thinks will be the secondary go-to option as he gallivants around Japan. So I'll have to update you potentially on that for next round. But now is the time to, of course, answer a few of your questions that were sent in. And hopefully we were able to answer, by and large, the questions you would have had around the captaincy side of things, replacements for Xerri, and potential replacements for the likes of Martin, Horne-Francis, and Touk Miller. So let us answer those other questions you've sent in our segment, of course, called It's All Good, Man.
Wait, Jimmy, what?
It's all good, man.
So the first question we had sent in was by Simon Lawther. Lawther? Is that right? Yep, I think I've butchered that. But anyway, from Twitter, he asks, Cogs back for the Giants named in the centre. Am I insane for taking the punt in exchange for Horne-Francis, or do I go a bit safer with Bolton or Humphrey? And he's put in brackets there, no Touk, so good get more midfield minutes. Also got no cash for anyone else. So your hands are tied here a little bit, Simon, unfortunately, due to the fact you don't have any more cash to put on the head of Horne-Francis to go for a safer option. I know you've mentioned there Bolton. I wouldn't be going for him at all. I'm not a massive fan of him. Humphrey appeals to me a little bit more because of the fact, as you mentioned there, he should get a little bit more CBAs off the back of Touk being injured. But even so, is it a guarantee it's going to happen and continue to happen across the course of the season? I don't know. And you've mentioned Cogs. Now, Cogs, even though he's named in the middle, or was going to be named, I think Kingsley mentioned it for this coming weekend, I wouldn't be so sure about it. Now, in his games that he's played across 2025 to date, he's actually been playing on the wing. And of course, Josh Kelly, he's been playing on the wing predominantly, especially over the past month. He's had 0 CBAs and he's been played exclusively on the wing. So I do expect that Cogs will come in and he will be playing in that specific role on the wing. And looking at Cogs' games, he actually hasn't had any CBAs in the games that he's been playing for season 2025, which he's only played the 3 in round 0, 1, and 3. He's had 0 CBAs and been played on the wing. So I think it's going to be like for like. He'll be played on the wing. And as we know, there's a little bit of a danger there with players played on the wing because the ball can be stuck on the opposite wing and the player on that wing that's not getting any action will suffer, of course, in SuperCoach scoring. So that combined with the fact that Cogs' durability is just up the shitter, I would not be touching him with a 100-foot pole. And with regards to the other question about Bolton and Humphrey, I'd be taking the punt, I think, on Humphrey instead at a pinch, I think. And if you don't have any other, trades, if you're going to go down to one trade in order to, maybe fund a little bit of extra coin to then trade out Horne-Francis to a bigger dog, I probably wouldn't do that. I would keep holding that trade and go for a bit of a risky option in Humphrey, 100%. But good luck nonetheless in your situation, Simon. It's not ideal, but wishing you all the best. We also have another question here from Delicious SuperCoach on Twitter, and they ask, Gorn in one trade and Horne-Francis to anyone under 430-ish K. In brackets, he has Short, Sweet, Flanders, etc. Or do I hold Horne-Francis until a donut? Or Grundy in 2 trades and Horne-Francis to anyone under 300K, McCarthy into flex. That's really tough, mate, without seeing your side, because if you have a little bit of depth off the bench, you could potentially make that move and go to Grundy in 2 trades and Horne-Francis to anyone under 300K, but there really isn't anyone under 300K that you could go for. If it does, by you saying that you've got McCarthy into flex, I assume that it means that you had a full suite of primos with 23 primos with McCarthy on the bench. Given that, I would probably take the risk. But if it means you're going down to 0 trades, I don't know if it'd be worth it. I'd probably go for Gorn and then have that remaining trade up your sleeve, and then have Horne-Francis go to, a Flanders. I don't mind Humphrey, who I spoke about. They're not ideal options, but in your second sort of discussion point there about Grundy in 2 trades, you'd probably have to go Horne-Francis to as I spoke about, Cooper Harvey, maybe. I don't know. But let us know what your team is, mate. Flick it through to us via DM and see if we can help you out there. And to round things out, we have Ben Armitage, who asks, do you think we need to worry about Gold Coast players just with them having an extra game? And I think they might rest one of the big name players, considering that Humphrey also might get CBAs with Touk out. Now, yes, that is a fair point to make, mate. If you are an owner of Noah Anderson, Matty Rowell, however, having said that, I think Gold Coast just need to continue to win. And if they were to sort of, rest any players because of that extra game they're playing against Essendon in round 24, I think it's flirting with form too much. And I don't think that Dimmer Hardwick would want to do that. So I wouldn't be too worried about it, in all honesty. And then again, Humphrey, you've spoken about him. Yeah, he's definitely an option. If you're looking at him as a potential trading candidate, yeah, for sure. If you wanted to go for that sort of risk v reward, then yeah, definitely he is someone that you can look at. But that brings us to the end of the show. But before we go, of course, don't forget, of course, to follow us on our various channels on YouTube. Just search SuperCoach Edge. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be notified of when our content does drop. On Twitter, at SuperCoach_Edge. You can find myself at DamoJ88 and Liam at LiamEvans_95. Facebook, Insta, TikTok. Just search SuperCoach Edge and you will find us there. Well, that's it for a quick fire episode covering all things round 18. Best of luck for the coming round 19. Let us pray. No more carnage. And we'll see you next week to do it all again. We'll catch you then. Cheers.